Well, hello everybody. Those of you that are in here, those of you that are on Zoom, thanks for coming. This is our first Cougars Care of the year. So those of you that are here to learn stuff, great. Those of you that are here to get your Sona credits, great. Those of you that are here just because you love the sound of my voice, even better. My name's Nathaniel. This is Ray up at the front podium here. She's going to be running all of our Zoom stuff. So for those of you that are on Zoom, if you ever have any problems as we go through this today, just message Nathaniel and Ray will answer you about whatever's going on. I'm excited that we get to spend the next, hour to an hour and a half together. We're going to be talking about recognizing a friend in need. So hopefully that's what you came here for. Hopefully you're in the right place. If you're not in the right place, that's fine. You can, I guess, leave if you want. Ray, can you click over to the slide so that my clicker will work? Oh, too fast. So like I said before, those of you that are excited to be here for your Sona credits, please make sure that you're registered on the Sona system. Those of you that are thinking about attending 4 of these workshops, which would be great. If you do attend 4 of these workshops, we're happy to provide you with your certificate of completion for your resume, build up those, finer lines of the resume and stuff, but make sure you fill out the survey at the end so that we have your attendance. If there's any problems, if anything comes up, questions about anything, you can email me. That's my personal email address there, nfernandez@apu.edu. So yeah, this being our first Cougars Care, we're just kind of, like I said, spend an hour, hour and a half together. Hopefully there's not a lot of this is not therapy or anything. So we're not going to be deep diving into a ton of stuff, but this is a mental health lecture. And so if there's anything that comes up that's stressful for any reason, hey, take a break. Feel free to step outside. I don't think that'll happen, but it does. Feel free. Also, the restrooms for those of you that are inside are just over here, to my right, your left. So feel free to step out at any time as well. We're going to record all my lecture bits for people that want to view this afterwards, but we're not going to record any of the parts where we're doing participation. So feel free to ask me any questions that you have. You're not going to be on recording or whatever. There's no quote unquote stupid questions at all, because we're all coming to this at a different space, right? Some of us, maybe you're senior psych majors and a lot of stuff. Others of us are I don't know, freshman math majors, right? You don't know a ton of this emotion stuff. So please ask any questions as we go throughout. Those of you that are online, you can feel free to message in the chat at any time. Our goals for today, basically, we're going to go through and hopefully talk just a little bit about mental trends at APU first. And those trends are actually sort of reflective of wider trends in college education in general. And then we're going to talk about specifically our 4 R's model of helping a friend in need, right? And that's recognize, respond, refer, and report. So that's the 4 R's, right? Now you're totally going to remember that. But if you're not going to remember it, that's okay, because we brought little handouts. So those of my interns that are around the room, if you could pass out the color handout to anybody that doesn't got one. Those of you that are online, look to the chat, or one of the interns will put in the file to be transferred around. And then we're going to just end with a little plug for helpful resources around APU. Basically, I'm going to tell you that the counseling center is cool because I work there and they pay me to say that. But I also do believe it. So sounds good. Anybody any questions on the agenda for today? All right, let's dive in. So why are we talking about this? Why are we doing this? Well, you guys all decided to show up here today, so I don't think I have to tell you too much on the fact that mental health is important. But just in case I do, right? This is an academic institution, right? We're a learning institution. And so you're going to be learning and trying to succeed in your classes, trying to pass your classes, right? And so you see that actually stress is the #1 thing that can impact folks' ability to succeed in their classes. So as of our last survey data, and this is all pre-pandemic data, unfortunately, COVID kind of messed up our next round of data collection. So 39% of folks said that they did significantly worse academically within the last 12 months because of their stress levels, right? And so You also see other stuff, right? Anxiety. Over 30% of folks are feeling anxious at least sometimes, and that's messing up their schoolwork, right? That's definitely something that I've dealt with and I can identify with. I always like to point out that cold and flu is on here, right? We're just about to enter that cold flu season. And also sleep is our third rated one here. So like, get more sleep than you guys are getting. But that's a whole different presentation, so I'm not going to get into that right now. But obviously, I'm a counselor. Like, I care about your academics, but what I also care about is, next slide, please, actually how you're doing, right? Actually what's going on. And so these are some more mental health related data from, again, the last 12 months. And so we see that in the last 12 months, 88% of folks have felt exhausted at least once. 91% of folks have felt overwhelmed at least once, right? 75% very sad, 70% very lonely, 66 anxious, 58 hopeless, 45% depressed. And then this is one of the more scarier numbers. 13% of folks in the last 12 months have considered suicide at least once. Now, there are about 45 people signed up for this session, in between folks that are here in person, folks that are online. And so that would indicate that's about 5 people in here today that in the last 12 months have thought about suicide at least once, right? And so these are really sobering thoughts, but they're things that we deal with all the time, things that we have to face, because if we just pretend that they're not happening, right, then that's not going to do anybody any good. And sometimes when it's us that's dealing with those things, obviously, we want you to reach out for help. If you're struggling, I want you to, come see me at the counseling center. Like, that's what we're for, right? But we're all here today. This is our Recognizing a Friend in Need course, right? Because we're concerned, like, what if that's my sister? What if that's my cousin? What if that's my best friend, right? How do I talk to them? How do I notice when they're maybe not okay? And what should I say when I do notice these kinds of things, right? And so start with a little bit of scriptural inspiration here. This is from Matthew. Obviously, this is the NRSV translation. So Jesus said to them, all authority in heaven and earth have been given to me, have been given to you. This is the Great Commission, right? Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age, right? So all of you that are Christian out there, I know that's not the whole audience I'm talking to, but I know it's a lot of you, right? We get really nervous about these things. We get really worried about like how we could possibly think about talking to somebody that's maybe considering suicide, that's maybe not doing well, that's maybe really going through something. How do we even talk to that person? What do I even do, right? Well, we know that God's with us in that. And so what I'm going to try and teach you today, all this stuff, this 4R stuff, right? I'm going to give you some tips and pointers, but in the end, it comes down to that care that you already have for this person, right? It's recognizing a friend in need, right? And so some of these tips and tools and tricks will hopefully be useful to you. But inevitably, the thing that's going to help people, is recognizing that they're important to you and them feeling that back from you, right? And you have God's support, and you have my support too. I'm giving you this training right now. So you're not alone when you're doing that kind of thing. So that brings me on to our 4 R's model. Everybody feeling okay so far? Ask questions as we go along if you have any. I'm eating up time rather quickly here. So, recognize, respond, refer, report. And so this whole model, we've designed it to assume that you're not necessarily a mental health professional, right? Because maybe some of you are mental health professionals, or some of you want to become a mental health professional. Like, that's great, right? But even if you're working, like if you're talking to your friend or your family member or your neighbor or whatever, like even if you were a professional counselor, you're not a professional counselor to them, right? And most of us aren't professional counselors in this room. I happen to be one. And so this whole model that I'm going to try and teach you today, the idea is to give you the skills to help connect somebody to a professional counselor to get them the help that they need, that it doesn't have to all be on you, right? So I'm going to walk us through this whole thing today with the idea of a fictional student. We got a fictional case. This is Pat. We'll read little vignettes throughout kind of to make it a little bit more example-y. So Pat, our fictional case here, they're an 18-year-old biblical studies major and an MEL scholar. And you notice that Pat's always disheveled, that he has dark rings under his eyes. Much of the time he seems preoccupied and seems to be unable to focus during meetings and during work. So our first R is recognize, right? So what do y'all recognize about Pat right now that like might be some red flags that he's not doing too good? You can shout him out in the room. You can type him in the chat online. Yeah, in the back.
He's not getting a lot of sleep.
Not getting a lot of sleep. I was just harping on sleep a minute ago. Exactly. What else do we see? Yeah.
He's probably really stressed because he's always disheveled.
Really stressed, right? So he's not looking so good all the time. And that usually means something's going on, right? Now, of course, we all have our different levels of fashion sense, right? You know, I don't typically have a very good fashion sense at all. That's why I like to wear work provided polos, because then it's just like an easy uniform kind of thing. So when we talk about disheveledness, it's always relative to their current, right? So like if you know somebody that's like always on point, right? And then they just come in a little bit more casual, yeah, they're not disheveled, right? But that change in style for them or that change in grooming habit can really reflect maybe something's going on. Or somebody that dresses more just like casually or within normal range looking a mess like Pat does is another indicator. Yeah, perfect answer. Anything else? What else do we see? Yeah.
He's overwhelmed because he can't focus on one thing and multiple things.
Yeah, unable to focus. So obviously, focus is a big thing that comes up a ton, especially for y'all as college students and working with other college students, befriending other college students, right? And so focus, we're always thinking about, right? We're thinking about, you know, ADHD and the proper diagnosis of those kinds of things. And that should be done, right? If you're ever concerned about your attention, talk to a counselor, you know, get checked out, right? But one of the things that people don't think about a lot of the time is no matter what's happening with you, like your attention is going to be one of the first things that gets messed up, right? Because we've all been super sad before, can't focus on nothing. We've all been super angry before, can't focus on nothing. We've all been super scared before, can't focus on nothing, right? And so that lack of focus, lack of attention is like one of those broad signs that's important to look at in all cases. I think we nailed most of them. One more thing that stands out there. Anybody else? Any more suggestions? The one thing that I want to highlight here that we haven't nailed yet, you guys nailed a whole bunch of them, which is great, is demographic factors, right? So this Pat character is an 18-year-old biblical studies majors and MEL scholar, right? Now, making a lot of assumptions here, this isn't true for everyone, right? But many of our 18-year-olds are first-year freshmen, right? And so if you happen to be a first-year freshman, right, or if you know some other first-year freshman, that's a hard time. That's a transition period, right? You know, same thing for our graduating seniors, right? There's all kinds of changes that are going on when you have major life transitions. And so it's possible that Pat is going through a major life transition, right? He also is in the MEL program, which is an awesome program, but it's a challenging one and an important one. And so the extra workload that somebody's going through can also be useful to think about, right? Whether that's academic workload, actual workload like at your job, or et cetera, right? So these demographic factors matter in addition to some of the other things, symptomology that you're observing, right? Yeah, Lana.
What's MEL stand for?
Man, you're putting me on the spot. So it's with our SCRD program, and it's multi-ethnic something. Ray will have an answer for you in just a moment. I'm stalling while she Googles.
Multi-ethnic leadership.
Multi-ethnic leadership program. I nailed the M and the E, I just didn't get the L. So yeah, next slide, please. So again, these are some of the obvious signs, right? And we nailed a lot of those obvious signs. You got them all, right? Well, they're not even on here, some of this stuff. The deterioration of personal hygiene, right? But obviously all of these kinds of things that you or your friend or somebody you know, or even just somebody you're walking by on the street is like super high. They're crying uncontrollably. They're behaving bizarrely. They're speaking in incoherent sentences. Like, I don't need to train you how to recognize that person is in distress. Like, you got that already, right? That is very obvious signs of distress. So what's more important sometimes to take a look at is our less obvious signs of distress. Next slide, please. So these are some of the things that we were just nailing right now, that forgetfulness or difficulty concentrating, right? That's an early sign of becoming overwhelmed, right? Low frustration tolerance is also one. we talked about sleep. We haven't talked about weight changes. So extreme weight loss or extreme weight gain, either could represent that something is going on with you. It's not just one or the other. Excessive procrastination, right? This is one that I like to highlight when I'm talking to students like y'all, because oftentimes we procrastinate, we think we're lazy or dumb or just have no work ethic, right? Okay, sometimes we do that. Sometimes we are lazy, right? But I would say that in my clinical experience, like 90% of the time somebody is procrastinating something, it's not because they're lazy. It's not because they don't have the energy. It's not because of any of that. It's because something else is going on, right? Maybe they're too anxious about the work. They're afraid they're going to do it wrong, so it's hard to get started. Or maybe they're too anxious to, go in and talk to their boss or whatever, and so they're not showing up for work or whatever it is, right? It's other factors that you contribute to these procrastination things. And so instead of viewing somebody that's struggling with procrastination as negative, right? Maybe we could view them as somebody that's maybe going through something and that we need to respond to empathically. Yes.
How do we do that for ourselves if we're going through that?
Yeah, exactly. So good question. So for those of you online who didn't hear, the question was, how do you respond empathically to yourself if you're going through that, if you're going through that same procrastination problem? Well, there's a lot of hopeful ways that we could do that. I'm about to switch into our responding section in a moment. So hopefully some of those tools will help. But I think that one of the reasons why this presentation is the whole recognizing a friend in need is because it's so much easier to sell people on recognizing a friend in need. That's why so many of you have come here, right? It's so much harder to recognize ourselves in need, right? So I'm not going to try and give you a cheap answer and say it's super easy. You just do this, right? But the idea I think would be to notice it for yourself and ask yourself, oh, I'm being really procrastinating on this. Am I just being lazy or am I actually feeling some other kind of emotion? Am I feeling scared right now? Am I feeling angry right now? Am I feeling sad right now, right? Am I feeling another emotion, right? And then if you're able to identify that, right, then you're able to deal with it more, right? If you're saying, hey, I'm just procrastinating on this because I'm too worried about this other thing going on.
Because I think I'm going to do it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I think I'm going to do it wrong. Well, then I've noticed that now. Now I can say, be nicer to myself, hopefully, and maybe I can talk to somebody about that, right? Maybe I can go talk to my classmate and say, if it's a class assignment, how do I do this right? Or maybe I can go talk to my boss or my supervisor or whatever. If it's a work day, it's can you give me this task? I'm trying to do it. How can you give me some more help? Can you give me some more guidance? Or maybe you can even, talk to a mentor or a pastor or a counselor, even if it's something that you're consistently getting hung up about, and say I'm not sure why I'm always getting hung up on this, but I always am getting hung up on this one thing. And then you can deep dive with a counselor or mentor or whoever about that, find out the reason and kind of fix the reason, you know what I mean? So a very good question, yeah. Did that answer your question at all?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Oh, so I've got a few more things on here about recognizing things online, since we're hopefully not in a ton of online classes, but we're still in some online classes. Those of you online right now, you're in an online class, right? So online things are very similar in a lot of ways, but you don't necessarily notice if somebody's looking at Michelle with their cameras off, So one of the things that I always like to throw in here is on being on social media and stuff. They've done research. Psychologists will research anything. It turns out people that are more likely to be suffering from depression are often using more blues, blacks, and grays in all of their Instagram and all the choice of their filters. And are also pasting way less pictures of people and way more pictures of non-people objects, right? Landscapes or et cetera, right? So this is not a one-to-one thing. If somebody puts a cool sunset with a weird filter on it, don't immediately think they're super depressed, but it's something to think about, right? So I always want to throw that out there as well. You skip forward again, right? Go one more, please. So we'll get back into our Pat thing, right? We talked a little bit more about these recognizing signs. So you recognize that Pat's got these dark circles under his eyes. He look a mess. He's not concentrating on anything. And you say to him hey, Pat, how you doing? Are you okay? Right? And immediately Pat breaks down and he tearfully admits that he's been feeling miserable ever since the breakup that he had with his partner. He relates that he can't sleep, can't concentrate, and really has no motivation for anything anymore. He goes on to confide in you that he's considering dropping out of APU. So let's do it one more time. What do we recognize in here? Any other things, signs of distress that we recognize in this vignette. Yeah,
I'll say the fact that he immediately breaks down and says, "Get rid of flying."
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time you will ask why they're okay, and even if they're not, they'll say, "Oh, fine." So the fact that he's immediately breaking down, it's like really.
yeah. Now, there's clear social like implications of people always trying to pretend they're okay. I think that's not probably a good thing. I'd like to encourage us to be more open about our feelings, but it is what it is, and people often hide that, right? So if he's immediately breaking down and tearfully breaking down, right? Like whatever's going on is big. It's not just a small thing that's bothering. That's your hand as well, or?
Like he feels like he wants to drop out of AP and start like a last resort.
Yeah.
So he's just like,
Exactly. So hopelessness is a big one, right? I'd assume that Pat's feeling hopeless. Even on top of that, right? If we just take what you're talking about, considering dropping out, right? Anytime we're talking about major life change that somebody's considering while they're distressed, that goes to show that they are highly distressed, right? Now, maybe Pat should drop out. I don't know. Like, I hope not, right? But maybe APU is not the right place for him. Whatever, right? It's not the end of the world. You know, he can find his own path. It doesn't have to go through APU, right? But this is something that somebody that's going through something and is all of a sudden saying, I'm dropping out of school. All of a sudden saying, I'm quitting my job. All of a sudden saying, I'm moving to Alaska, right? All of a sudden saying some big life thing, right? That's a key sign that they're really going through something, right? And it's oftentimes important to not make that decision when you are feeling really stressed out, right? When we make major life decisions, we'd like to be at a point where we are calmly considering the options and making sure we make a positive choice for ourselves, right? And so that's a great one. Yeah, double things that you mentioned there. Anything from anybody else that you see here? Yeah, in the front.
It just straight up says he has no motivation whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no motivation for anything, right? You know, so again, motivational issues go back to that same procrastination issue that we were talking about before. They're typically associated with some kind of feeling, right? Rather than just laziness or something like that. Especially very low motivation in general, oftentimes associated with a lot of depressive type feelings, right? That's going to be a major piece of depression symptoms, especially if you're not motivated to do anything that usually is fun for you, not motivated to, you know, watch your favorite sports team, not motivated to hang out with your friend, not motivated to spend time with your partner, et cetera, right? If you're not motivated to like go to work, well, that's because like work's not the best all the time, right? You know, but if you're not motivated to do things that formerly brought you joy, that's a major indicator of potential depression. Yeah, great. I think you guys nailed all the stuff that I wanted to say. So we're feeling good about recognition a little bit. Okay, I see some nods around. We're going to do our second handout now. So those of you interns, if you could pass these out, Ray, if you could drop it into the chat. We're going to break into small groups in just a second. So just turn to the 2 or 3 people that you're sitting around, kind of like form up into groups. And groups of between 2 or 3, 4 is fine if you need to. And we're going to go ahead and look at this handout. If I could get the next slide whenever you're ready, Ray. So this handout, you'll see it's front and back. It's got 5 different situations on it. I want you to practice what we just talked about in terms of trying to identify what's going on, identify warning signs, right? I'll give you guys about 5 minutes to go through it, and then we'll come back as a group and kind of process what we got. Everybody feeling good? Everybody get the assignment? All right, sounds good. Yeah, feel free. Okay, good. I think you guys are doing really well. I'm glad that we're sort of sorted into this. We're doing a good job noticing things. I also know that it's 1:43 and I really haven't told you what to do about any of this yet, right? So hopefully now that we've got some practice recognizing what's going on, recognizing people in distress, recognizing when our friend, brother, sister, cousin, whatever, needs some help. Now, what do we do about it? Ray, if you could give me the next slide. That's where we go into respond. And again, this colored one, highlighted one, you can look at the next statement there. And so when we respond to somebody in distress, this is like the most scary thing to do, right? To actually bring it up and actually say something, actually be like, hey, like, I'm worried you're not okay, right? Hey, I'm noticing that you're rapidly losing weight like this. Hey, you're cutting all the time. Hey, I know you said you want to die, like all of these things, right? It's really, really scary to do those kinds of things. And I want to encourage you that you're already halfway there by caring enough to talk to somebody, right? when we respond to somebody, there's no magic words, there's no particular way you gotta do it. Yeah, there's some better ways and some worse ways, right? But the main thing when you're responding to somebody, the main thing is to be there for them, to be their friend, to respond with empathy first, right? To care about somebody first. Not even necessarily, that's why we have respond and refer separated out on our sheet here, because I don't want you to see your friend struggling and be like, hey, I see you struggling. Here's a number for the National Crisis Hotline. All right, later. Like, that's not what we're looking for, right? That's not an empathic way to respond, right? So the main focus when we're responding to somebody in need is to care for them first. Respond and get what they're feeling and let them know that you get what they're feeling or that you're doing your best to get what they're feeling, even if you don't quite get all of it, right? And so take your time, take a person seriously, right? If somebody's joking about suicide or somebody's joking about some kind of traumatic event, right? Ask them like, you okay? Is that a joke or are we, right? Take people seriously. Ask purposeful questions to communicate your concern. Listen attentively. So this is that little acronym there, SOLAR. Basically, if you're going to want to listen to somebody, usually you want to square your shoulders up to whoever you're talking to, open posture, make eye contact with that person, lean in slightly so that rather than like leaning back and like not paying attention, right? And then relax. This is our common acronym for good nonverbal behaviors, and relax is so important, right? You've been being friends with people, you've been being nice to people, you've been empathizing with people since you were born. That's somewhere probably between, 17 and 40 years for all of us in here, right? So you have that skill, you have that ability, right? Lean back onto those things. Things not to do. One good thing would be to not leave anyone with suicidal thoughts alone until they talk to a professional that can help them work on that, right? So there's a lot of resources for that. The National Crisis Text Line is one. The National Lifeline is another, 988. If that person happens to be an APU student, we have a 24/7 hotline as well that I'm going to go into in a minute. So connect them with somebody. You don't have to do it on your own. Don't feel like you got to. Help them connect to an emergency service. That's what they're there for. Don't debate, argue, or lecture about morality, right? It's really not a good time to get into somebody's face about their politics, like when they're not feeling well, right? It's really not a good time to debate your different religious philosophies on lifestyle choice, right? And if they had been more this way or that way, they wouldn't be feeling this way. It's a terrible thing to say to somebody who's not feeling well, right? Even if you think it's true, even if beyond thinking it's true, even if you know it's true, right? It doesn't matter in that moment. That's not a useful thing to tell this person who's hurting, right? And this actually goes on to someone's beliefs about themselves. And this is one that's obvious, right? Don't argue with somebody that's not doing well. But this one is a little bit more tricky that I always want to kind of highlight. If somebody really believes that they're no good, if somebody really believes that no one cares about them, no one loves them, if somebody really believes that they're too stupid to succeed, somebody really believes that they're, a waste of space, right? I don't believe that. And I don't think you believe that about your friends either, right? You wouldn't care enough about them, right? But it's oftentimes when they're right in the middle of it, not useful to try and change that thought process as much as it is to just validate that that's true for them in the moment, right? When somebody tells you I'm worthless, instead of saying, no, you're not worthless, you have so much worth. I think you're the best person that's ever lived, right? Instead of saying that, you could say something more like, wow, thanks for sharing that with me. It must hurt so bad to feel that way, to feel that worthless all the time. It must feel so hopeless, right? And that's a much more empathic thing. That's a much more connecting thing than trying to change their mind. Even though changing their mind is important, right? Even though it's not true. They're not worthless. They have value and worth, right? But going into that at that point, not useful, right? So the main thing is, again, to respond empathically, care about a person, communicate that you get what they're feeling. And that's the focus of it. Not trying to change what they're feeling, not trying to validate what they're feeling, but getting what they're feeling. That feel good to everybody? Okay, we're gonna do our second, and I promise final, breakout for the afternoon here. So again, in groups of 2 or 3, probably 2 would be ideal. We're gonna do a little role play situation here, right? And so a good way to kind of approach it is saying something like, man, thanks for sharing that with me or whatever. I never been through that myself, but I'd imagine I'd feel, pissed, or I'd imagine I'd feel just like hopeless, or imagine, whatever it is, the kind of emotion that they're feeling, and try and imagine and put yourself in their shoes, right? And that'll get you pretty fun. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So again, for those of you online, if you couldn't hear, what if you have the opposite problem? What if you've been through the exact same thing somebody else has, except you're obviously 2 different people and you obviously have 2 different experiences of that same occurrence, right? How do you not make it about you? How do you not import your thoughts onto the other person, right? And so like that, I think, is actually almost like harder sometimes, right? Because when we know we're out of our depth, right? When we know we don't know what we're talking about, then like we're more hesitant. That comes to our mind, and we could say like, "Hey, I don't really know how it is, but I'd imagine you feel X, Y, or Z," kind of thing, right? But it's harder when we are closer to it and we make assumptions, right? Because anytime we're making assumptions, can't say that line, that has a bad word in it. Anytime we're making assumptions, that makes a donkey out of you and me, right? And so like, we have to kind of check ourselves when we feel that way, when we feel compelled to say what we're saying, and really key into what they're saying, really key into like asking more questions. How did that make you feel? Or how are you doing with that? Or, or even saying like, that happened for me too, right? Like I went through a divorce as well, or I lost a parent as well, or I, whatever the situation is, been a roommate conflict as well, right? How are you feeling about it? What's going on for you? How is it for you, right? And asking those questions, you can get their emotionality out of it. And maybe you felt really sad when whatever the thing was happened to you, but they're really frustrated, right? Then you can kind of remember how you probably felt a little bit of that way. You probably felt a little bit of similar vibes. But you can follow their path a little bit more than following your own path. That makes sense. Does that answer your question, Bob? Yeah. Question in the middle. Exactly. So if you felt the same thing, can you say like, hey, when I went through that before, I felt this kind of way, or when I felt that way before, I did this to help me get over it? Is that something like you'd want to kind of do, right? That's a perfect question, because it's about to lead me into my next section, which is refer. Have you read ahead of my notes, or okay, you're just on point right now? Great. I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to put that question off just until I get to the next section. Any other questions on this section? Anything from the chat, Ray? Okay, perfect. All right, let's move into that and let's answer your question. What do you do? How should you say if you've experienced that before? Can I get the next slide? So some further questioning with our good friend Pat, and some good empathetic listening to him has left him feeling hopeful that things can get better, but he's not sure what to do next. So you ask him if you can help him get connected with APU resources, and he likes the idea, right? You see this transition, right? You were listening first, and now you're making a suggestion, right? That's how we, sorry, can I get the next slide? My clicker, I'm having all kinds of clicker problems today, you guys, but bear with us. So when you refer somebody to a resource, whether it's like a resource like this, whether it's like our University Counseling Center, whether it's like our campus ministry office, whether it's like our SCRD office, or whether it's just like, it was good to go to the movies and get my mind off of it, right? You want to go to the movies together, right? Like these suggestions are best done when they're couched in that empathic understanding, right? So one of the tools that we talk about a lot is called feel, felt, found. So like basically you use those 3 words in 3 consecutive sentences, right? So I feel, Pat, how sad you are, right? I felt that way before when my girlfriend broke up with me, right? And in that time I found that it was really helpful to kind of spend more time with my friends and just kind of go out and do fun stuff to get over it, right? Like you want to hang out this Friday, right? And so you're couching that recommendation in the empathy for them, and you're turning it into a question, when you tell them what to do, right? So that you're not giving them an order of what to do, but rather you're asking them, right? So I think you already were wonderfully doing that in your comment, right? When you're like, I've gone through that before and I found like that X, Y, or Z helped me, I don't know, do you want to try that kind of thing? Would you be down for that kind of thing, right? And there's an intellectual humility about that and a recognition of the other person's autonomy, a recognition of the other person's free will, that you're not giving orders to somebody and that you're saying, like, my experience is my experience, just like sort of what Bella was saying a minute ago. My experience is similar to yours, but not the same. But this helped me. Do you think it would help you? Do you want to give it a shot? Right? And so this is like one of the most challenging things, right? Especially if you're going to recommend like professional counseling or something, right? Like that, right? A lot of times when you respond to somebody, maybe they're okay because you just already listened to them and it was good enough to have somebody listen and now they're feeling better, right? Or maybe you want to refer them to like, let's go get coffee this weekend, right? That's a low, like, stakes kind of recommendation, right? But when somebody's like perhaps really distressed and the recommendation becomes something a little bit more intense, right? Like, let's go talk to a pastor about this, or let's go talk to a counselor about this, or, let's go X, Y, or Z kind of thing to like a professional resource that somebody may be a little bit intimidated by, a little bit scared to go do, right? That's when grounding the recommendations, grounding the referrals in the actual rapport that you have with the person, in the empathy that you established by taking your time to respond to them before just knee-jerk trying to kick them off to a resource, right? That's when that pays dividends, right? And still people won't necessarily agree with you, right? That's okay, right? But it's still, you're doing your best to help that way, and you're the most likely to help them access the kind of care that they need, especially if somebody is like hesitant to go get the kind of care that they need, right? And so that's the best way to do referrals. Questions on the whole refer idea? Grounded in your empathy. So next slide, please. This is one of the places to refer to, which is the University Counseling Center. I told you I'd get a plug in there at the end. All of you all are APU students, I assume, since you're all here. That means you all have 100% free, 100% confidential services just waiting for you at my office. In fact, you paid your tuition dollars paid my salary, so you kind of already paid for counseling. So go use it. We're on East Campus in Magnolia Court. You guys might know that better as the Shire. It's if you go from here and keep walking that way till you almost get to Stater Brothers, you'll pass the baseball fields and there'll be a bunch of student housing there in small bungalows, right? That's where the Student Health Center is. For those of you that have been on campus long enough to have to drop off a COVID test at the Student Health Center, we're right next door to them, okay? If you have trouble finding us, you can also just give us a call because all of our services are available by phone or Zoom as well. Or if you just want directions on how to get there, our admin Kim will pick up. She's an amazing person. She'll talk you right through it. If you want to switch to the next slide, please, Ray. This is where we're at. This is called Magnolia Court because there used to be a magnolia tree here and they haven't changed the name. But now there's just a skinny tree. And in fact, that skinny tree has since died since this picture was taken. So actually there's just some bushes in the middle here. But Student Health Center right there, Counseling Center right there. Please come see us. We have 24/7 care available as well, right? So not everybody's gonna need help like between 8:30 and 4:30 Monday to Friday, right? That's just not how this kind of thing goes. So if you call us at that 626-815-2109 number, again, 626-815-2109, I'm gonna write it on the board. We will answer anytime, day or night.
So the 24/7 is just for the phone, or is it y'all?
For the phone, yeah. So our phone counseling is 24/7. If you want to come do an in-person meet, we're happy to do that. We're open 8:30 to 4:30 Monday to Friday. But our after hours service, even if you want to call in and just leave a message like, hey, can I come in on Monday? So this number, if you want to take a picture of it right now, it's also probably on this form that you have here in front of you, the 4Rs form, but it's something to remember. Next slide, please. So the one exception is if you're sitting with somebody who is suicidal, right, or maybe has actively already done something to harm themselves, ingested a pill, has a firearm, something like that, please call 911 right away. Don't call our office first. But even if you do call our office first, we're just gonna tell you to call 911. So, but that's gonna be like in very, very rare cases, right? That's not a common occurrence. Even if somebody is dealing with life or death things, if they're not an immediate imminent threat to themselves right at that moment, call us first rather than the cops. Next slide, please. All right. And the final R you have on here is report or tell someone, right? So that can kind of feel weird, right? Especially oftentimes when you're talking to somebody and they kind of ask you like, can you keep a secret or something like that, right? Which like, I'm not a big fan of that question because it puts you in kind of a really hard place when somebody asks you if you can keep a secret for them, right? Because like, what if you need help helping them, right? And so telling somebody about it is never a bad thing. Even just telling somebody about it, you know, for your own health and well-being, right? So if you need to tell a friend about it, or you need to tell a mentor about it, or you want to come to counseling yourself and say, I was talking to my friend and they were really stressed out and that made me stressed out, that's always a good idea to do. Here at APU, an extra thing to add is we have what's called the APU Cares team. They're wellness concierge service, basically. So like, probably a lot of you, like, even if you're like, hey, like, friend that's going through something, like, I think we should get some like professional help with this. Like, are you down for that? And they're like, yes, I'm down for that. And you're like, okay, good. I don't know where we should go. I don't know what we should do about that, right? You don't actually need to know if you're talking about APU resources, because if you go to APU Cares, which you can find on your APU Now app, which you can find on your home.apu portal, which you can find by typing APU Cares into the Google machine, right? It'll bring up our notification form. You fill out either a form for yourself or a form for somebody else, write your name down, write your email address. Somebody will reach out to you and let you know about all the resources they think might help you, all of the things that we would like to be able to offer you here at APU, because we have a lot of resources and we want you to use them. So next slide, please. So that's my final slide. And I promise you no more breakout groups. So I do have a breakout group written here, but I'm not gonna make you do it because I accidentally promised before I ran out of slides. So instead of doing breakout groups, do this individually in your head right now. What did you learn today that was surprising to you? What was a new thing that you want to remember that I talked about today? And what is one thing that you can commit to actually trying to do this week? What is one thing that we talked about that you can try and implement, whether it's, you know, in your discussions with your friends or in your daily life or whatever it is, even in your own self-talk with yourself? How can you respond more gently to yourself, right? But what's one thing that you want to remember that you learned? What's one thing that you can actively use with this, okay? We're all gonna commit to that. We all feel good about that? All right, I'm seeing lots of nods, lots of tired nods because it's about 2:30 on a Friday. Let's go to our weekend. Let's wrap this up.